Hi, welcome to the Miss Chronicles. I am your host, Pastor Ceci. We are continuing with this season's focus of connections. And what we're going to do today is that we're going to look at unspoken needs. This is our continuation of the discussion of connections. We've looked at meaningful connections. How do we get it? Um, you've heard testimony. So we're going to look at unspoken needs. What are these unspoken needs and how do they impact our connection and ability to connect with others? It's going to be in three parts. And this first one that we're going to look at is being seen, really being seen, and the value of that in establishing connections and even some of the difficulties we may have in being seen. Buckle up, relax, whichever one is fitting for your situation. We are about to go further along this journey of connection. To get us going, I want to share a quote Queen Elizabeth II said. And she said this: I have to be seen to be believed. I have to be seen to be believed. We don't sometimes recognize our need to be seen for various reasons. And some of us love being seen. It's almost something that we thrive and we absolutely must have. Being seen can be positive and it can be negative. But we want to look at this experience of being seen. It means something to be in a group of people that we may love and desire connection with, but they not actually see us. It can be a frustrating experience. It can be burdensome, it can be lonely because it's not that they may not recognize us by name or say, hey, there goes so and so. It's if they actually see our needs, see our uniqueness, see our value. And this comes down to perception. And perception is a tricky experience. When I think about a child that, must have attention, just is driven to be the center of attention, or I can even hear people's testimony of, I just love being seen. Being seen just seemed to give me so much energy. Or, actors who say, when I'm on a stage, just the electricity in the room from the applause and the joy that I have because they saw me. What I did brought them value or entertained them. We rarely recognize that that is a fabric of all of us to be seen. It's a fabric, it's a element of who we are. And so we, can look at other people and say, well, if I'm doing this, if I'm doing that, why don't you see me? Someone who's giving their heart on stage and no one claps. A child that has exposed their heart or they're seeking to understand, but is met with correction, rebuke. Some of us have gone, even as adults, to share something really important and personal, and the receipt or the response of the person we received that we sought out does not respond favorably. It may be some misunderstanding of your intent. I can recall a situation where I hadn't really said anything, but my presentation had been read as offensive. And so the interaction with the person was always tense. I never knew why. Any of my attempts to gain understanding was met with defensiveness. And so I had to accept that I wasn't being seen, right? And then extend mercy because I could not read the other person's experience. I couldn't read what they were feeling that would cause them to respond that way. But I could tell you that in the beginning, I was seeking a fault find. What's wrong with you? Why are you acting like that? And that's usually how we respond. If we're not seen or we're treated in an adverse way, we seek to find fault with those who we think should be able to see us, right? You're my parent. You should be able to see me. You're my pastor. You should be able to see me. If I'm an employee on a job, you're my supervisor. Why don't you see me? You hired me. You knew from my resume, right? But we rarely consider that these experiences where the people that we expect to see us do not see us, we rarely look at those experiences as opportunities. Opportunities. Because the sound, the need for us to be seen is so much louder. Rarely do we dig in deep enough to consider, where does this need to be seen come from? Why am I so driven to be seen? We see it all the time on social media. We see it all the time in society, right? Where people go to extreme ends to be seen. And sometimes we'll say, well, they don't know Jesus. Well, I've seen people who have confessed Jesus as Lord, and they're active, but they are always needing to be seen, right? Needing to be the loudest, needing to be the most useful, right? Driven in service to the end that they're exhausted and don't know how to take vacations. Is that driven by an unspoken need to be seen? Is that driven because some of the people that we wanted, some of the most important people that we needed, did not see us? In our relationship with God, we have some opportunities, but do we see even God in our midst to consider the opportunities? The challenge of being who we are is navigating these unspoken needs. I have a need, and sometimes maybe I use other methods to be seen that aren't really pure motive. I have a hole or I have a void. And so now I'm serving out of my void. I'm helping you out of my void. Interesting. All right, God. Interesting is that we are in a society um, really founded on capitalism, right? The ability to supply a need for someone, something that they want for an exchange of value. So let's put that in the context of being seen. I'm going to offer you my service for the expectation that you will validate me by receiving it. And then when I don't get the validation, it only further complicates my experience of serving, as well as being okay in my own self when I'm not seen. But one thing about capitalism, there is an established currency of exchange, right? I give you this product, you will exchange money to me. So the person receiving the money has the value for the money, and the person receiving the product has a value for the product based upon their own emotions, or based upon their own psychology and lived dynamic, right? Well, do we even consider that we haven't established that with some of the people that we have connection with, whether it be by blood or otherwise? Have we even had an awareness of what the exchange will be? Some people complain about their return in serving God or giving to God. I paid my tithes. Why aren't I wealthy yet? I gave my service. Why haven't I received service or acknowledgement or promotion? And we supplement or exchange the return of the promise that we have in Christ for the handout that we can see in our exchange to people, because we didn't really recognize that we never started with God. We didn't actually have that establishment or that connection with Him to understand fully for ourselves what would be the exchange. So now we're frustrated, looking for fault, trying to figure this out, feeling confounded. Because why don't I feel seen? Why am I left bereft of the desire and the fulfillment of being seen and received? If we didn't start with God, how do we then get to God? Hmm. Let's explore, how do we get to God? When seeking to connect to God, when we've been in a regular experience or a frequent encounter of being unseen, it's important to take some time out to confront how we're really feeling about this. Even if it's not about God, maybe it's about connecting to someone else, but because we're spiritual, we live by the Spirit, then our ability to govern our lives by the Spirit has to always return back to our source, who is God. So I'm needing to look at my ability or my willingness to actually embrace truth. I have to look at my willingness to embrace God's ways over my own ways. And maybe I have difficulty there because I've become numb, not because of what God has done, but the frequency of my experience, the pain of my heart. Maybe I become uh, complacent. I'm just trying to ignore it. Like, if I can just do something else, I'll be fine. I'm just going to suppress it and ignore the elephant in the room. So when I want to be seen by somebody, or I want to be seen by God, and I'm interacting with people and they don't respond like I want, then I cut them off. I dismiss them. Maybe sometimes they don't see me sufficiently. It's not that they don't acknowledge that I'm there, like they're not rude, but they don't seem to share the same values. So now I go to, let me take control. Let me manage as much as I can every relationship. Let me qualify or quantify each person that encounters me. I no longer trust God to build a community around me. I no longer keep my heart open to meeting new people. I just want to mitigate, minimize the negativity in my space. I was reading how we are at a point in our society that we are more isolated than we've ever been. More people give the report that they don't have meaningful relationships or connections with people. And it's not surprising. We are able to feign connection through social media. We've learned how to be polite and courteous well. So we just kind of keep going, and we give ourselves to fitness. We give ourselves to, maybe it's even spiritual bypassing, where now we're just, everything's God, and I'm just going to stay, speaking in tongues and keeping everything else out. But what it doesn't do is actually bring the opportunity, the blessing, and the benefit of being seen, because there's a deeper need that we haven't learned to connect to. And so we tend to think that this is a place of shame, like God is disappointed in us, when really we're disappointed in ourselves. We're disappointed by our experiences. And the truth is, scripture shows that God is not lost on what we're feeling. Like, God is not separated from us, that He doesn't understand what we're suffering through, that he doesn't understand how it feels for us to be unseen, or he's not empathetic. That's a better word. He's not empathetic to how we feel and what we're experiencing. And so we tend to push it down because it doesn't seem that important. Because if people don't make it important, then maybe it's just not important. Maybe I'm being extra, right? I've been said, people say that to me before, you're just so extra. Well, it's not that serious. It's not a big deal. What do we do if it seems like it's not a big deal? Well, in the scriptures, God actually demonstrates for us how He is able to reach us even in that experience. So, looking at Genesis chapter 16, verse 11 through 13, and I'm going to read it from the New Living Translation. This is an experience of someone who technically is outside of God's boundaries, but they were a servant who was chosen by God. So, Genesis 16, verses 11 through 13. Hagar. Yeah. If you're familiar with scripture, you know Hagar. Hagar has an encounter with God in these verses. Backstory: Sarah decided to take matters into her own hands because she thought she was unseen by God. That's good too. But we're gonna look at Hagar. And so since she felt that she needed to take things into her own hands and God wasn't really getting her experience, um, she selected Hagar to sleep with Abraham, and have a child, hoping that this will fulfill God's will. Hagar was pregnant now, and she's responding to Sarah rudely. And Sarah is saying, "Oh, I will not accept this suffering and this contempt from her." And Abraham said, "Do what you want to do." Abram said, "Do what you want to do with her. You're the one to make the decision. You're my wife. You make the decision." Sarah begins to mistreat her, so much so that Hagar runs. Hagar knows she's pregnant. God tells her, "You're pregnant. But let me tell you what you're pregnant with." So, verse 11 through 13. And the angel also said, "You are now pregnant and will give birth to a son. You are to name him Ishmael, which means God hears, for the Lord has heard your cry of distress. This son of yours will be a wild man, as untamed as a wild donkey. He will raise his fist against everyone, and everyone will be against him. Yes, he will live in open hostility against all his relatives." Thereafter, Hagar used another name to refer to the Lord who had spoken to her. She said, "You are the God who sees me." She also said, "Have I truly seen the one who sees me?" Now, you may say, what does that have to do? How did God? Here's the thing. Hagar had ran away. She was frustrated. In our being unseen, we are frustrated. And we may not physically run away from a situation, but we may emotionally run away. We'll make a vow and be like, "I'll never let that happen to me again. I'll always take care of myself. Don't worry about it. You do you, I do me." But those are reactive responses to something negative happening with us. As Hagar was reacting to the abuse and the anger of Sarah, she's running away and she meets the angel. Now we see that Hagar is starting to be seen beyond just the relief of her situation, but she's being seen as a mother. She's being seen for what she's about to birth. And this son of yours, now we're getting description about this birth that's going to happen. Because when God sees us, he goes beyond even what we wanted from people. And at the end of the verse, right, Hagar now shares her experience with God. Because in her being seen by God, yes, the name means God heard her. But Hagar now is sharing her experience. And she says, "No, not just that, God, but you are the God who sees me." Being seen by God is revelatory that that it goes deeper than just see my performance, but it's about seeing who I am, seeing my deeper yearning. And this is what she got from God, that in response to God hearing her, she says, no, this experience was me being seen for who I am. And is it possible that that's what we're asking from people that they could never supply? She wanted Sarah to see her. I mean, Sarah invited her to sleep with her husband. So clearly she saw something about her that out of all the servants, she picked Hagar. But then when Hagar fulfills the request, because she was a servant, could she really deny it? This need to be validated by Sarah. God said, let me validate you. Let me be the answer. And let me show you why me seeing you is greater than Sarah seeing you. Would you be willing to go so far to, instead of holding people to what you think they should do and how they should see you, could we actually dare to go so far to seek and to accept what God says about us and what he sees in us? Because what she says after that at the end of this verse is, have I truly seen the one who sees me? Wow. Oh Lord. I hope you hearing, I hope you tracking what I'm tracking. That when we are truly seen by God, when we allow ourselves to come to the end of our frustration and turn to the Lord, not only does he see us, but now we can truly see him. Are you willing to endure, to allow God to see you, but to also see him? How could you be changed by that experience? How could your life excel and be promoted and made better? Not only because God sees you, but that you also see him. One thing about being seen is coming into acceptance of where you are in God and your belonging. What happened here with Hagar is that in her being seen, she could accept her station and she could anchor herself to the promise, to the word of God, versus where she was attempting to place herself. What we're not perceiving, probably, or what is not so apparent in the text, is that Hagar is trying to carve a place of belonging. So she's wanting to be seen. But the way that she's going about it is not serving her well. The way she's going about it is disrupting what she thought was due to her because she slept with the master Abram. That's a whole dynamic to think about. Because are we trying to get something the wrong way? It's not that the desire is wrong. Her wanting to be esteemed is not negative. It's the way that she was going about it. So she was drawing negative attention and it brought her further chaos. So when she has this encounter with God, God is giving her insight. He is giving her what she did not understand so that she could accept where she was, so that she could now operate in wisdom or at least do better than what she was doing. And so what we see with Hagar is that because of this dynamic and what she has incurred that would take her beyond what she was struggling with right now. When we consider that God's perception, what he's going to reveal to us is greater than what we're trying to get, beyond our understanding, beyond our limitations, then it's an invitation to let go of the desires to be seen or perceived a particular way by people. But then to accept the blessing of being seen by God, that we can have genuine connection and community with those around us. Because we're not looking for them to give us what they do not have. We are clear and resolved that our being seen comes first from our God where we belong. So our ability to accept and endure the experience of being unseen can actually usher us into the opportunity of being seen by God and then being healed and fortified through the God who sees us. Yes, God revealed to her in the name Ishmael that God heard her, but she returned honor. She esteemed him greater by saying, "You are the God that saw me. You are the God that sees me. And you have so humbled me that I am able to see you." And now, look, in response to this, Hagar goes back. She's no longer running. She's accepting the promise, the word of the Lord for what will happen, because she's been fortified now by the word of the Lord. Being seen by God first fortifies us that we can enjoy, embrace, endure, right? This experience with people, because Hagar still had to serve. It's not like she went back and chilled. She was still Sarah's servant. And she had to accept that station. She had to accept that station to receive that which God has said would happen. Being seen by God will not always change our circumstance, but it can change us that we may triumph through our circumstance. And this is why it's important to look to God first, because then we're anchored. Then we're able to have mobility. Then we're able to be flexible and agile because we're reliant upon Him versus people to perform or act in a certain way. We can now extend mercy. We can now be understanding. Now, Hagar didn't fare so well. I mean, the end had to be the end. She had to separate, they had to go their own way. Yet, she still went away with more than what she came in with. For us, these unspoken needs, and this one particular unspoken need of being seen, He allows this need to draw us into the greater, to draw us into the deeper, that we can actually experience the depth, the width, the height, and the expanse of God's love for us. So, in all that we are seeing, let us take confidence in this one thing, that God is not remiss to consider us and to see us if we should dare turn to Him to actually be seen. Because what happened thereafter is that she was able to go back and serve Sarah. Sarah saw her clearly enough for her to be able to endure as her child grew. It's not maybe about people seeing everything about us. Maybe they just need to see enough for what God has assigned them to do for us. Because when we've been seen by God, we've been seen completely. That their limited perspectives does not adversely impact us. It actually helps us to become and to fulfill what God has given us to do in the earth and to be in the earth. So this is going to connect to our next episode, part 2 of Unspoken Needs, where we're going to look at what else have we not maybe shared with others, maybe even shared with God, that impacts our ability to connect and to find fullness and joy in our relationships. Maybe it's even impacting how we see ourselves. Because when I think about being unseen, I'm going to close with this. When I think about being unseen, I can recall times where, because I wasn't seen by other people, then I would accept how they saw me as how I should see myself, limiting myself, being timid, being restrictive, trying to fit into a mold that God didn't design me for. Hmm. It is a blessing to embrace the opportunity to allow God to see us, because it can and will alter how we see ourselves. That's what happened with Hagar. She no longer saw herself just as a servant and subject to Sarah. She was beginning to see that she had a greater work in being the mother of this child. So the experience of being a servant to Sarah, she could endure for the joy of being a mother to Ishmael. So until our next episode, please remember to allow yourself to be aware of God's presence in your midst, His aid and might and power available in your midst every day. Thank you for joining the Midst Chronicles. I look forward to the growth, strength, and fruit that will come forth from this podcast. By your listening and doing better in your life by what we are sharing with you, we are made better as well. Every Tuesday, a new episode will be available, so subscribe, share, and interact with us. Blessings and peace to you. Until next time.